Deputy Barry. Minister Harris, I'd like to ask you, and I did ask you in a PQ, why there was not a fixed price contract on the National Children's Hospital. I got quite a long answer, but I want to tease out some of the bits of that answer. The first one was that you said there was a two-stage procurement process, a full tendering contract for Phase A below ground, and then a tendering of Phase B, the works above ground. Then you went on to say that the procurement strategy of Phase A and B was developed and finalised between 2014 and 2016. Was that not when your Taoiseach was Minister for Health? And doesn't he bear some responsibility in this? And then later on it goes on to say the reasons for adopting the two-stage process, a number of reasons, but one of them is that market engagement with Irish and international contractors identified this procurement approach would attract increased competition. Was that BAM who told you that market engagement with Irish and international contracts would attract increased competition? Because somebody in the market told you that. And then they also went on to tell you that you will reduce the exposure to rising inflationary pressures in the construction markets throughout the procurement at 2016 tender market rates versus 2018 tender rates. Well, that worked nicely, didn't it? And could you please answer me who it was gave the government that advice? And I would suggest to both yourself and the Taoiseach that the issue is not, as he suggested, that some bids are too low to be unrealistic, but that the entire process renders the state financial hostages to private companies who have various mechanisms to inflate their profits and their margins. It's underbidding, but you're entering a very useful cartel arrangement for the builders and the developers. And my final question, are you hostage also to the EU procurement processes, or can you step outside them?
Minister Harris or Minister Harris?
I might take Minister Donoghue will deal with the issue in EU procurement because it falls within his remit. But Deputy Smith, as you rightly say, we've answered this already in parliamentary questions on a number of occasions as to why there was a two-stage procurement process. Why was that decided upon? And obviously PwC will continue to analyse the appropriateness of all of these matters. But there were benefits to the two-stage procurement process, and it is important to acknowledge that you are right. It was decided and indeed endorsed by the government's contract committee for construction, and indeed by a procurement subcommittee in May 2015 that this was the right approach to take owing to the size and the complexity of the project. It was also decided that the traditional design and tender method of procurement was not suitable or realistic. So these were not determinations made by me as an individual or indeed individual government ministers. They were made by procurement experts and indeed endorsed by the Government Contracts Committee for Construction and its procurement subcommittee in May 2015. Some of the benefits, though, of that process, Deputy Smith, included full participation of suitable main contractors and subspecialist subcontractors in the tendering process. Also, the timelines and the need to facilitate an early start on the site. By breaking the work into sections, this approach ensured that the early phases of the work could commence, while the detail and later phases was being finalised and agreed. But I don't mind saying, in advance of the PwC report, where we got extremely badly let down is the elasticity of the cost for Phase B. So whilst actually the GMP process, guaranteed maximum price, a phrase we've all become used to now, the GMP process, locked in the prices at 2016 prices, it's the quantities of materials required were clearly not realistic. And this is what PwC need to grapple with now in terms of where that actually went wrong. Had we gone with a different model, though, we would have actually potentially taken longer to deliver the project. Seems to have been the advice of the procurement experts at the time in 2014 and 2015. And we also... No,
to increase the competition.
So, Deputy Smith, I have answered that question. No, the government's procurement strategy in 2015 was decided and endorsed by the Government Contracts Committee on Construction, and was ultimately.
Sorry, Deputy, you'll have an opportunity.
You may not agree or like the answer, but the answers are as.
Deputy Harris,
you don't like the answer because you've decided in your own mind that there's something to do with a construction company, or you're going to keep on naming on the record of the House, as is your. Well, I'm not sure it's your right actually to keep naming companies in the record of the House, but that's your choice. I'm outlining to you what the government went through. Indeed, a government I wasn't actually a member of in 2015 in terms of deciding the right procurement approach to take, and that was a decision, though, that I did bring to the government in April 2017, and one that I stand over based on the expert advice available. Might ask Minister Donoghue.
Are you taking a question?
Yes, I will indeed. Perhaps the Deputy could clarify in a moment why she thinks we're hostage to EU procurement rules. But broadly, we are subject to and part of procurement policy of the European Union.
So you can't step outside their policies?
Any
circumstances?
Well, There are circumstances in which, for example, in relation to the use of local labour that I'm aware of, that we can ensure that flexibilities are there in relation to procurement. But because procurement policy follows on from the operation of the single market, I'm not aware of any circumstances in which we could completely ignore it, Deputy.
Deputy Barry.
Okay, so